Welcome back to Insight. David Farnbauch joins us from Sweeney Law Firm, and we want to talk about informed consent when it comes to medical procedures. And my first question to you, just here off the air, was, does that mean like the stack of papers you get when you go into the hospital and sign your life away like you're buying a house?
Well, I mean, nowadays you have to sign your life away before you have any type of surgical procedure. So yeah, that's part of it. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, about sort of the common misconception that if you sign all those papers that they ask you to sign, if something goes wrong, that somehow you've precluded yourself from bringing some sort of medical malpractice case.
So what is then, I guess, informed consent specifically in regard to medical procedures?
Well, the law of informed consent is pretty simple. Medical providers have to give you all the pertinent information about the procedure, alternatives, the risk of the procedure. They have to actually tell you about that and educate you before you have medical procedures done. Mm-hmm. That's required.
And can that be verbally, or does it have to be written? Is there?
Can be either, but I think the important things that go into informed consent, for example, if you're having a risky surgery, they have to sit down and actually talk with you about alternatives and risk, and they have to chart that they've done that. And if they don't do that, then they haven't complied with the law on informed consent.
What's a risky surgery? Is that any time you have anesthesia, or is that just medically more complicated than that?
Well, I think there are certain surgeries that are a lot more risky than others.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So they explain this, and I guess then what? What if something goes wrong?
Well, I think a common misconception, with the public about informed consent, that if you sign some sort of a form that lists all these risks of the procedure and one of those things come to fruition, that you can't bring an action for medical malpractice. And sort of an old adage in my business is you can't have someone sign an informed consent form and sign away your right to pursue an action for medical malpractice. If the doctor does not do that procedure in accordance with what we call the standard of care, mm-hmm. if they provide a substandard surgery or a service to you and you're injured, you can sign 1 million forms and it's not going to preclude you from bringing a medical malpractice lawsuit.
So there is a certain standard that obviously the physician has to meet. I mean, yes, you need to know the risk, but
correct.
That would assume that everything goes perfectly with the procedure. There's still risk.
There's still risk.
But if everything doesn't go perfectly, that's where perhaps we need to call you.
Correct. And so there's a difference between a normal risk of the procedure, that is not medical malpractice, but if the doctor doesn't perform the procedure in accordance with the standards of care, then it doesn't matter what forms you sign, you can still bring a case for medical malpractice.
And so if something goes wrong, is it generally a good idea to contact someone like you to know the difference between what's routine and what's maybe sloppy?
Right. I mean, that's the big part of doing cases for medical malpractice, is getting in touch with lawyers who know how to screen cases properly to distinguish between what's a normal risk of the procedure and a procedure that violated the patient safety rules and the standards of care. And that's where I think going to a law firm that specializes in medical malpractice, like our firm, where we actually have a physician who is a lawyer as part of our team, we know how to screen medical malpractice cases.
And there's no risk or obligation with that initial consultation.
Correct.
People can just come on in and find out more. So if you have been injured in a medical procedure, follow up and find out if there's something that can be done about that. And you can do that through contacting Sweeney Law Firm. We'll be right back on Insight.